What are the differences between the book and the House of the Dragon series? If you don't know the most interesting chapter in the history of the Targaryens of Westeros and you haven't watched the series House of the Dragon yet, I envy you, and if you have seen it, you should probably know that the series has significant differences from the book Fire and Blood. The book was written in 2018 by George R. R. Martin, the creator of the world of A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. And unlike the unknown fate of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, it has a definite ending: Dance of Dragons. Just like the Game of Thrones, the House of the Dragon series is an adaptation that the showrunners naturally have to use their imaginations and of course their visual and screenplay techniques to create an interesting story. In fact, it is interesting to know that the book Fire and Blood does not have any special dialogue. And unlike the books of Song of Fire and Ice, which told the story from the point of view of one character in each chapter, the story is told like a history book from the person of Thalit. One of these characters is the court clown named Mushroom, who is not in the series and his presence is unlikely in the future. House of Dragons has many differences with Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, the story progress over time became not only faster, but also more multifaceted. From the north of Winterfell to the south of King's Landing, they were all part of the different stories of the Game of Thrones world. In this respect, the House of Dragons series is more similar to the first season of Game of Thrones, which eventually took place in Winterfell, King's Landing, and sometimes other location, and does not go anywhere else. Of course, now and with what we have seen since the end of the first season of the series, it is not unlikely that we will see more than 3 to 4 fixed areas in different parts of the House of Dragons in the coming seasons. The series House of the Dragon often takes place in the capital of Westeros or King's Landing, and sometimes visits Driftmark and Blackwater Bay, Valyrian family and Dragonstone Castle, Togren family seat. Why should we know this? Because the House of the Dragon so far tells a story focused on a family that ends up ruining itself. For this reason, the series has a harder task to shape serial adventures like Game of Thrones with 7 royal families: Aegon's Dream, Daenerys Targaryen and the White Walkers. The book Fire and Blood, on which the House of the Dragon series is based, does not mention any events such as the prophecies of Aegon the Conqueror, or Aegon the First, whom Alicent mistakes for her own son. In fact, the dream of Aegon Fatih that King Viserys mentions twice in the series is just a trick that the writers made for the birth of the first spin-off of Game of Thrones so that the audience can connect with it more, and over time not only the role of fan service to play for the angry viewers of the 7th and 8th seasons of Game of Thrones, but to pull himself out of its great shadow and find an independent identity. The dream that Rhaenyra mentions in the last episode has no special theme in the Book of Fire and Blood, and is just the writer's play with the events that were always considered the biggest threat of the original series or the White Walkers of Game of Thrones. In the end, the House of the Dragon tries to start with the statement that the events of the series begin exactly 173 years before Daenerys Targaryen. In fact, in the whole book of 700 pages of Fire and Blood, there is no mention of the word Song of Fire and Ice that Aegon the Conqueror now wants to attribute to Daenerys or the White Walkers. Rhaenyra and Alicent's friendship. The relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent in the series is more than a mother-child relationship. It is a friendship that develops from the very first episode. Of course, the series has 2 important differences from the book. First, in the series, the age difference between Alicent and Rhaenyra is a little more than just a few years. So when Alicent and Viserys got married, Alicent was 18 and Rhaenyra was only 9 years old. In addition, they do not have a very strong and serious friendship like in the series. In fact, by creating this friendship, the authors of the series have tried to extract the events that eventually become the spark of the Targaryen civil war from the heart of an old friendship. A friendship which, of course, only affects the weight of feelings and is not mentioned in the books. Rebel Prince Daemon Targaryen occupies Dragonstone Castle in the second part of the series, and in the meantime, He also steals a dragon egg from Dragon Pit, which Rhaenyra and Otto Hightower go there to get it back and confront him. In the book, there is no mention of the rogue demon illegally taking over the Dragonstone, nor of stealing the dragon's egg. After Viserys officially crosses Daemon off his list of possible successors, the Rogue Prince retreats to Dragonstone and is alone for a long time. There is no place in the book for the false story of Mysaria's pregnancy, or the white worm that Daemon tells Otto Hightower to justify stealing the dragon's egg for his unborn son. Of course, in the book, Mysaria is really pregnant, and of course, Hightower and Viserys not only blame Daemon for having an affair with her, but Viserys forces him to ship the pregnant Mysaria back to his city. On the way home, Mysaria loses her child in a heavy storm, further straining Viserys and Daemon's relationship in the books. The Triarchy Island and the war with Crabfeeder. The House of the Dragon series does not have many action scenes, but in the third part, it has a half-and-half battle, but it is extremely attractive. In this episode, Daemon Targaryen, a rogue who has avoided any help from his brother, teams up with Corlys Velaryon and his brother and son to destroy the Triarchy Island, which is run by a person named Crabfeeder. In the meantime, the powerful dragons of the Targaryen and Valyrian families do not help them much, because their opponents have taken refuge in the caves of the island, and taking them out has no other result except for many losses for themselves. The fact is, in the book, Daemon happens to have Viserys' support from the start in defeating Crabfeeder, and Daemon doesn't beat the poor messenger to death. Additionally, the series shows that Daemon is defeated many times during the 2-year battle with Crabfeeder, but in the book, Daemon defeats Crabfeeder in most of the battles and ends up beheading him. The series only shows us Daemon's upper body cut in half from the rest of his body for more excitement and rebelliousness. A different Criston Cole. Characters in books are usually always different from their TV adaptations. Criston Cole in the House of the Dragon series is one of those characters who, not necessarily in terms of appearance, but also in terms of motivations and the process of events, takes a different path. After the strange and later connection between Rhaenyra and Criston Cole, we see her in a conflict with Lenore's lover Velaryon, which ends up killing her at Lenore and Rhaenyra's wedding. Of course, this scene never happens in the book, and Criston Cole kills this character, Joffrey Lameth, in a tournament for similar reasons. In another scene in the penultimate episode, Criston Cole murders a member of the Green Council, a council where everyone unanimously wants to put Aegon on the throne instead of Rhaenyra, and only a character named Lord Bisbury opposes, whom Criston Cole kills with a single blow, without even a direct order from Alicent. In the book, however, Bisbury is merely captured by Cole and, in one account, dies in the dungeons of King's Landing awaiting trial. Will Lenore survive? In the episode where Rhaenyra and Daemon rekindle their love after so many years, Rhaenyra is still unable to marry Daemon because either Lenore or his wife is still alive. House of Dragons shows us how the Targaryens kill this boy not just out of love, but to maintain their family power, while in the same episode we saw how Corlys and Rhaenys lost their daughter. Although this happens in the book and Daemon actually hires someone to fake Lenore's death, Lenore survives in the show. Although others believe her death, Lenore fakes her own death and leaves her home in Driftmark by boat to an unknown destination and shaves her hair because she probably doesn't want anyone to recognize her in the next life. It is questionable whether Lenore will return in the series or not, but considering the many characters who experienced such returns in Game of Thrones, it is not at all unlikely. Rhaenys did not start. Rhaenys Targaryen rides his dragon in the first episode towards the end of the first season and destroys the roof of the Dragon Pit, which is the Great Hall of Aegon's coronation ceremony, on the people of King's Landing. In this frenetic scene that even die-hard fans of the books didn't expect, there's a strange moment where Rhaenys Targaryen, or the Queen Who Never Was, can be in the blink of an eye with her dragon Alicent, Aegon, Otto Hightower, and Alicent's other 2 children burn alive, and then escape from the danger very easily. The thing is, he doesn't, and it's one of the exceptions to this list, which is no different from the book. In fact, the main difference between the book and this scene from the series is that despite being imprisoned, Rhaenys never has a problem escaping the dragon pit in the book. And in fact, when he reaches Rhaenyra in Dragonstone and informs her of the Green Council's betrayal, Aegon has not been crowned yet. The show's writers have made one of their best decisions for an interesting time interlude in the House of the Dragon by including this fictional but wonderful scene. Aemon Targaryen, madder than ever, Aemond, or Alicent's second son, is already one of the serious antagonists of the story. Although the series has anti-heroes like Daemon, Aemond even goes beyond these words, and we officially saw in the final episode of the first season how Lucrece, with vigor or the dragon he got in exchange for losing one of his eyes as a child, Valyrian, and his dragon tore him to pieces. Of course, the producers showed this scene differently, as if Aemond lost control of vigor, and before that, even Lucrece himself could not control his little dragon or Orax that set fire to vigor. After this scene, Twitter and Reddit users related Viserys' statement at the beginning of the series that controlling dragons is an allusion to this scene, and although this shows the writer's intelligence in using these fine and coarse hints, but Aemond actually murders his own nephew in the books to spark the Dance of Dragons. Every detail of this sequence matches what is described in the book, except that after Lucrece emerges from the Baratheon court, Baros Baratheon's betrothed daughter provokes Aemond, whose little nephew could probably see more than one eye. He will take upon hearing this. The enraged Aemond came out of the court and with vigor attacked Arax, who was 5 times smaller than Vigor, and 3 days later, the seawater washed the bodies of Lucrece and Arax to the shore, and this was the beginning of a civil war. From now on, we can see that Aemond is portrayed much softer in the series, which of course is a completely natural occurrence, and we are still facing one of the best roles in the series.